Good morning. All right, I'm Steve Davis. I'm chair of newspaper and online journalism department, and this is day 2 of our event. And we've invited in some fabulous guests to speak today about this topic, and we've asked them each to do 10 minutes on a topic of their choice, either personal experience in a newsroom or covering a story. Our theme is diversity. We were showing some videos at the beginning. Those videos were created by students in the race, gender, and media class. And the students in Com 117 are voting on those. We'll have a couple picked as their favorites, and we'll be announcing those on Monday. So as we talk about diversity here at Newhouse, we do try to talk about it in class and practice it in our work. We're not big on events because we think it's what we do that matters, but events are important, and this certainly seemed like a good time to have one like this. We all know the numbers that come out on occasion, and they continue to show that our newsrooms are not as diverse as our audiences, and that's something that we continue to work on. One thing that really helps in these discussions is to have a role model. I still look for role models. I know students talk about how valuable they are, and we just happen to have 4 really great role models here today. And there's a bio sheet outside that I hope you picked up that has a little more information on each one of our guests. So please get one of those later if you haven't already. So I just want to say we're going in alphabetical order, and I say that because I don't want Teron Moore's mother to get mad at me. So, Teron's mother is here. Denise, you want to wave?
Oh.
Yeah. When we redo the herd, we need to get longer microphones.
I'll work on that.
All right. So, Michael Fletcher, the Undefeated, Jesse Holland from the Associated Press, Michelle Marsh, ABC and a Newhouse grad, and Teron Moore, Teen Vogue and an SU grad. So it's especially nice to have them here. If you're tweeting today, and I hope you are, it's Journalism Matters or Race and Media SU. That's AND, not the ampersand. So feel free to do that and to use those. After this session this morning, our guests are going upstairs to the I3 Center. That's 432, 434 in this building, Newhouse 3. And they'll be available for an hour just to chat one-on-one with students. So I hope you take advantage of that. A lot of people to thank, but I especially wanted to mention Ann Osborne, Karen Henderson, Brad Gorham, Dean Branham, of course, Moneybags. She always comes through, and we appreciate that. I think that's everything I need to tell you. Dean Branham, did you want to say anything? Just a minute. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. I did want to just thank again our guests for being here this morning. Thank you all, especially our 2 alums. They all have day jobs and important work that they do, but they understand how important this issue is, and they made time in their busy schedules to come and spend a day and a half with us. So thank you, Michael, Teron, Michelle, and Jesse. We really appreciate you doing this. I also want to thank our faculty who were involved in this project, because they too also have day jobs, and this is extra. And so thank you for taking on this extra work. And I think somebody needs to thank Steve Davis. Yes. Because and sometimes I don't thank him enough, but last fall, Steve came to me as we were looking at what was happening on the journalism landscape and being concerned about some of the numbers we were seeing about what was happening in our newsrooms across the country and some of the issues that we saw happening out in the world that journalists were covering. And he said, I think we really need to do something on race and media and look at this issue and give our students an opportunity to hear from people who are out there dealing with these issues. And from that conversation, this day-and-a-half symposium was born. So, Steve, thank you very much for making this happen. I think last night, for those of you who had a chance to be here, I think it was fabulous, and I know the rest of the day is going to be great as well. So enjoy. I hope you learn a lot, ask good questions, and again, panelists, thank you so much.
Okay, there's one other person I forgot to thank, Christy McClurg, who's hiding over there, but she's awesome, if you don't know Christy. You need anything done, ask Christy, or ask me and I'll ask Christy. So Michael Fletcher will be first. He's senior writer with the Undefeated, writes about politics, criminal justice, social issues. He spent 21 years at the Washington Post, also worked at the Baltimore Sun, and co-author of Supreme Discomfort, The Divided Soul of Clarence Thomas. So, Michael, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Steve, and good morning, everyone. Good. I have to say to Dean Branham, my good friend. Oh, I have to stand on the rug. Okay. Oh man, that's the TED Talk part.
I was just looking at.
Oh, it was like a TED Talk. I was looking at. I was wondering.
Well, it's a nice
Okay.
rug.
Oh, this is better. Okay. Okay. I feel inspired already. I just wanted to thank Dean Branham for having me come up here. You know, she and I go way, way back. I'm not going to say how far back, but far back. And we've talked over the years about, you know, coming to Syracuse at some point, and she came through with an invitation, and I felt like I had to do it, and I really think it's a privilege to be here. I want to talk a little bit about reporting on race. It's something I've done a lot in my career, even though I've covered all kinds of other subjects. You know, I started in journalism many years ago, and I've covered everything from local government to national government. I've covered small town mayors and county council people, and I've covered the President of the United States. I've written about education, I've written about economics. As you heard, you know, I co-authored a book about a Supreme Court justice. And in all of these, across all of these topics, there's sort of one consistent, and that's because this is America. I think race has been a factor in all of, yeah, I was supposed to turn my phone off now, where is it? Really kind of funny. Yeah, exactly. Here we go. You know, as I said, race has been sort of a factor across all of that. I mean, it underlies everything, and kind of the racial disparities we see in this country, I think, in many ways speak to our history and really sort of kind of animate the biggest issues that we see fought out in our kind of political life. And learning how to report on those things fairly. You heard Maria talking last night about having an open mind, listening to people on all sides of the divide, people you may disagree with. I think these are key to kind of grasping the complexity of some of these subjects. You can go through the list. You think about voter participation rates, educational spending, property values, incarceration rates, test scores, crime victimization rates, unemployment rates. You can go on and on and on. And we all know that a fault line in all of those things is race. And informing people about these disparities, why they're important, how they came to be, why they persist, I think that's important to talk about and have people understand. But this kind of work is challenging because there's so many powerful narratives surrounding race. You know, we all experience race, we kind of live it every day in America, obviously, and we all think we know kind of what race is all about, and when we hear opinions that conflict with ours, we have a way of shutting them out, shutting them down, and basically not listening, and I think that takes away from what I would call good journalism. You know, I think back to some of the examples from my career. I did a story once when I first went to the Washington Post. I remember doing a story in Philadelphia, It was about a woman who I believe was living in North Philadelphia, then she moved to this, and she's a black woman, a black single mom, and she moved to this neighborhood in, I believe it's Northeast Philadelphia, called Bridesburg. The dean may know Bridesburg. And it's kind of hard up against some chemical plants, it's kind of wedged in an industrial zone, but it's kind of this hardcore, kind of almost stereotypical white working class community. So I go there, obviously I'm a black reporter, you go there, I did what you would do. I interviewed the woman who had moved in, she'd been harassed, got threatening letters sent to her house, and and the city had intervened, had a cop posted in front of her house and this sort of thing. And obviously you talk to her and, about her experience, you talk to social service people who tried to help her through that, her and her family through that. But I also wanted to talk to the people who would see fit to harass their new neighbor. I mean, why is it that you think that this woman is going to be such a blight on your community that you feel the need to send her a letter, to threaten her kids, to vandalize her home? And it was interesting, you sort of go, you talk to these people, and some of them were a little embarrassed. Some of them were straight up. They would say, hey, I don't want this to become like North Philly, where, where they have this horrific crime problem. And not only that, we hear this woman's on welfare, and we're a hardworking community. We don't want that sort of person in our neighborhood. No, it's not really about race. This is about kind of our quality of life. And so you include that in the story. I mean, I feel like you have to, put that in there. I may, obviously I disagree, but you include that because that's part of the mix. But I also included, I interviewed the landlord of the house where this woman had rented. And he didn't want to be quoted by name, but he told me, hey man, I don't understand what's going on. The last woman who lived there was also a single mom. She happened to be white, right? And she also happened to be on welfare, but no one knew, no one even thought about her in that way. And the little coda, what we call a kicker, at the end was, and he said, and she wrecked the place. She was a terrible tenant. So that's the kind of thing that you get. But it also cuts both ways. I mentioned I wrote about education. And a lot of people sort of have this narrative in mind, like, okay, one of the issues I got into when I wrote about education was this achievement gap you hear so much about. And a lot of people, sort of see that as strictly a function of poverty, a function of underfunded schools. But I said, what if it's more complicated than that? What if there are psychological factors? What if there are kind of societal factors that play into that? I kind of got that notion from, that Steele's research about stereotype threat and all of that. And I tried to find a laboratory, and I ended up going to Shaker Heights, Ohio, which is a kind of a middle-class town just outside of Cleveland. It's kind of upper middle-class suburb, really. And it has one high school, and the high school happens to be about half white and half black. And it's a school where you hear so much about AP courses and what have you. It's a well-funded school, and everyone in the school could take an AP class. You just have to sign up. No one wants to see your prior grades. There's no kind of hurdle to cross. It's just a question of you wanting to do it. So you go there, and the school board there had done some research into kind of this achievement gap. And it turns out in this middle-class town, you still had this huge gap. Whites were achieving at a higher level than blacks. Whites were taking more AP classes than black students. And it's the kind of thing, so you talk to kids about it, and you hear a lot of this back and forth about this idea of acting white, and that was something I was always very dubious of. But you talk to the kids, some of the kids worried about this, some of the black students. They said, you work hard at school and you kind of get branded as a nerd. I'm thinking, doesn't every sort of group of students deal with that? But the black students said they did more. So you kind of include some of that in the story, but you sort of go farther than that. I talked to some researchers. One guy was particularly interesting, was this anthropologist who talked about the effect that how society views groups, the effect that has on how kids view themselves and kind of view what's possible, and even maybe affects the kind of effort they put into school. This guy, he's dead now, Jonathan Agbu, and he's controversial himself, but nonetheless, he pointed out, he's done research all over the world. And one of the examples I put in the story was about Korean students. Apparently, in America, Korean students have this image of being, they're going to be hard-working, studious, high-achieving. And to greater or lesser degree, that plays out in the classroom. But Korean students in Japanese schools do poorly, generally speaking. And this anthropologist thought it was because of how Koreans are viewed generally by Japanese. And it sort of gets into a lot of things. And the story kind of wrapped all of that stuff together, kind of around the lives of students at the school, and also mentioned things that were surprising facts. The highest achieving group of students in American schools are African immigrants, for whatever reason. But I tend to think this achievement gap, it kind of goes more, goes beyond resources and poverty. That's a big part of it, obviously, but there's more to the story. And I think that's how we should be thinking about race, like sort of in a very kind of careful, academic. Think about it academically, but don't write about it academically. and try to be very sort of careful. Just, and I'll just sort of give you one more example. Challenge narratives. Write about things that people find maybe uncomfortable. I did a story that published yesterday on the Undefeated about this whole issue of what we used to call, when I was a kid, black on black crime. And the story really talked about how that phrase has become kind of a banned phrase, a phrase that some people find racially insulting at this point. And I wrote the story around the murder of a 13-year-old middle school basketball star in Mount Vernon, New York, who was cut down by a stray bullet on New Year's Eve. She was in middle school, but already that very day had gotten promoted to the high school varsity. 7th grade, 8th grader, she was 6'2", and she had a very good chance of being a Division I player. And she's like riding home with her mom, through the streets of Mount Vernon in the middle of the afternoon, and there's a shootout, and she gets killed by this stray bullet. So I used that as kind of a crucible, if you will, for talking about this question of black on black crime. Mount Vernon's a mostly black town, and and interviewed people who object to the phrase, and the bottom line for people became, call it what you want. You can call it crackers, but this is a problem and we need to deal with it. And we shouldn't worry so much about how outsiders may view that. I mean, sometimes you have to confront things head on to at least try to make real progress. I don't know how I am on time, is it?
Krista says it's time.
Oh, okay, no more examples. I'll just leave it there, and hopefully we can get into a discussion of some of that during the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael.